Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD News. The House Judiciary Committee met this morning in New York City to hear witnesses of violent crimes, which Republicans say are the result of District Attorney Alvin Bragg's policies, but Democrats on the committee said the hearing was a sham. NTD's Arlene Richards reports from New York.
One hearing, two perspectives. That's what we heard today at the House Judiciary Committee's hearing on New York crime. Some calling on Congress to pass tougher gun reforms to address the national gun crisis and saying New York City is safer than other large cities. Other witnesses testifying that District Attorney Alvin Bragg's soft-on-crime stance is the reason for the increase in crime and saying nothing's getting done. Republican Chairman Jim Jordan on Monday said keeping communities safe has always been a central focus of the House Judiciary Committee. He called on the Manhattan DA to uphold the law fairly, saying in Manhattan the scales of justice are weighed down by politics.
For the district attorney, justice isn't blind. It's about looking for opportunities to advance a political agenda, a radical political agenda. Rather than enforcing the law, the DA is using his office to do the bidding of left-wing campaign funders.
But the committee was divided on what the real problem is. Jordan pointed to a memo he said was written by Bragg in January 2022, directing assistant DAs not to prosecute certain low-level crimes.
The memo also stated that armed robberies should not be prosecuted as felonies. Instead, they were to be considered as misdemeanor larceny unless someone was shot during the course of the robbery.
He said the DA cared more about the perpetrators of crime than the victims. Representative Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat, said she was worried that the hearing wasn't addressing guns.
Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have prevented any kind of sensible gun violence legislation from passing to keep us safe.
Other Democrats called the proceeding a sham.
The chairman is doing the bidding of Donald Trump.
A mother of a homicide victim said politics wasn't the issue.
Victims can care less about anyone's political ideology or party. Neither do criminals. They don't go up to a person and ask them if they're a Democrat or a Republican before they bust them in the head.
Minutes before the hearing, New York City Mayor Eric Adams held a press conference. He said New York was the safest big city in America. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And a ban on so-called assault weapons. That's what advocates rallying in D.C. today are eager to make a reality. Our reporter Arian Pazdar speaks with Gun Owners of America to bring you both sides of the argument.
Hey, ho! Assault weapons have to go!
An organization called March 4th rallied in Washington, D.C. on Monday, advocating for a ban on so-called assault weapons. March 4th was created after a shooting in Highland Park, Chicago. Its website states that March 4th is a non-profit advocacy group with a singular mission to federally ban assault weapons. One of the speakers at Monday's rally listed a number of school shootings and blamed them on easy access to guns.
If any other product killed kids at this rate, it would be pulled from the shelves. Why are guns different?
Right.
Attendees on Monday printed school shooting victims' names and faces and laid them out. One of the speakers touched on the issue of shootings being more prevalent in the U.S.
As I spoke with parents from other countries across the world about mass shootings in America, they all said the same thing. They sympathized and they said, we just can't imagine because this will never be our reality.
To explore this issue of shootings in the U.S. and gun access in Europe, I spoke with Luis Valdez, who is with Gun Owners of America.
Just an example, I am from Austria. In Austria, every person over the age of 18 can buy a bolt-action rifle without any kind of permit. Yet Austria doesn't really have shootings. America didn't have shootings. It only started in recent decades, but guns were always around in America. So some people say guns aren't a problem. What do you make of that? And if guns aren't a problem, what is?
The problem is very simple. We have a mental health crisis where people with debilitating issues that should be seeking treatment have been swept under the rug. And worse, we have a revolving door criminal justice system in which hardened criminals who should be behind bars are given slaps on the wrist and let loose in society. We see it in places like New York City, we see it in Chicago, we see it in Los Angeles.
In Brazil, it's not easy to legally buy firearms. Similar to the US, the South American country is currently suffering from multiple school attacks a week. Most of them end with various dead students. The attackers in those cases are using hatchets, knives and similar weapons, not firearms. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
So what's behind the rise of violent crime in America? NTD's Kelly Wright speaks with Bob McDonnell, the former governor of Virginia, to get his perspective. Here's a look.
I want to ask you, being a former governor and a former attorney general who dealt with crime on a very difficult and yet frontline manner, what are you seeing in our country today? I mean, we've had more than 160 mass shootings so far this year.
Yeah, Kelly, it's heartbreaking. You know, I'm 1.8 mass shootings per day. I mean, it's stunning. I mean, when you and I were kids, this wasn't even a thought. I think it's a combination of things. Things have certainly gotten worse the last 3 years in the post-COVID environment. People having significant amounts of anxiety, depression, mental health problems through the roof. And that's a longer-term trend, I think, with everything from the incivility in our society, the lack of parental supervision of young people. So many of these shootings are younger people, teenagers and people in their 20s, Kelly. I think a large majority of them. And just, you know, we're not teaching people how to resolve conflicts in a peaceful way. I remember, you know, my parents teaching me how to do that. If you have a problem, you confront people, you talk about it, you listen, and you try to resolve it. You don't just go pick up a gun and come back in and shoot people you disagree with. And some of it's drug related. I mean, I think it's complicated enough, Kelly, that you can't say there's one solution. And if you start banning all kinds of handguns, that's going to take care of the problem, because criminals always seem to have guns, legally or illegally. They don't obey the law. So I think it's coming to an epic proportion that policymakers across the political spectrum have got to begin to forge solutions. But again, so much of this is the culture, the responsibility, the morals of our people. As those go down, I think you're going to see more gun violence.
I wanted to talk to you about the legal woes that the former President of the United States, Donald Trump, has been facing. As you know, he faced an unprecedented part of history, a chapter in history, becoming the first former president of these United States to be indicted and arraigned, facing and receiving 34 counts for falsifying documents and business documents. When you see the former President of the United States go through these kinds of legal woes, this one taking place in Manhattan, and yet he faces more down the road, what are your concerns about that? How do you view this case?
Well, there are multiple concerns. So much of the conduct of the former president, in my view, is indefensible. Certainly not what we want to have as the leader of the free world, a person in office, you know, paying off porn stars. Having said that, you know, I'm concerned all these investigations are being promulgated by prosecutors of the opposite political party. Attorney General of New York, Alvin Bragg, District Attorney, Jack Smith at the Justice Department under the Biden administration. So I'm a little skeptical, you know, having experienced some of this about 10 years ago in my own life, whether there's a level of partisanship where we judge conduct of the opposing political party different than our own. In other words, weaponizing the criminal justice system. I guess having said that, and particularly with this first one with Alvin Bragg, I mean, it's nothing but a political upside for him to be the first guy to indict the president. And when you look at the fact, Kelly, that his predecessor, Cyrus Vance, looked at this for a couple of years, chose not to prosecute. The federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office up there, looked at some similar conduct, apparently chose not to prosecute. And now here we are 5-6 years later. And all of a sudden now there's a new grand jury for a couple of years and they decide to go forward with 30-some charges. It does raise some questions. I think they got some statute of limitations issues. I think they got some significant evidentiary issues, especially when your star witness is a convicted felon, and some other things.
Appreciate you so much, Bob. Thank you so much.
All right, Kelly. Really a treat to be on with you. Thank you.
Now turning to the FBI, the agency makes unprecedented arrests of Chinese agents working for the regime's overseas police stations here in the U.S. Officials say it pulls back the curtain of China's long arm. NTD's Iris Tao tells us why.
A dark secret in the center of New York City. That's what officials say as they announced the arrest of 2 Chinese New York residents who are accused of working for the Chinese Communist Party and running a Chinese police station here in New York. Watch.
This nondescript office building in the heart of bustling Chinatown in Lower Manhattan has a dark secret. The Chinese National Police appear to have been using the station to track a U.S. resident on U.S. soil.
FBI officials and federal prosecutors say the Monday arrest make them the first law enforcement partners in the world to take into custody those involved in one of China's overseas police stations. And the one in New York, they say, mainly target democracy activists who are critical of the Chinese regime.
Now, the allegations you just heard sort of pull back the curtain on the PRC's audacious and illegal attempts to harass dissidents and stifle free speech in our country.
And that's not all. Aside from spying and physical harassment, the Chinese regime is also accused of creating thousands of fake personas on U.S. social media platforms. And the goal is to suppress critics as well as to spread propaganda.
The official PRC disinformation suggested the weakness of U.S. democracy and foreign policy, sought to sow political divisions in U.S. national elections, and conveyed conspiracy theories regarding the U.S. government's alleged responsibility for the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic.
And officials say the high-profile revelations on Monday served to send China a clear message.
That we are on to you. We know what you're doing, and we will stop it from happening in the United States of America.
Reporting from the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of New York, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.